Somewhat uniquely on the Cherokee XJ, power to the headlights is not drawn directly from the battery. It's sent from the battery to the switch on the dashboard, and then to the headlights. Now, to someone who doesn't necessarily speak electricity, that sounds like it makes sense. But it's not really the best idea, because when the full power of the battery comes through the switch, it makes the switch a load-bearing component. The reason relays exist is to take that load off of switches. By using only a small signal wire to toggle an electronic switch, a relay can activate a demanding load without the need to carry all that current through the switch. This is how normal cars usually operate their headlights. As I said, the Cherokee is kind of a weird one for doing it backwards per se. A perfect example on the XJ itself is the fog lights. The switch on the dash just sends a small signal to the fog light relays. And then these relays allow electricity to flow from the battery to the fog lights. The switch doesn't actually connect to the fog lights themselves. The H4 Headlight Harness upgrade converts our old XJs to operate on this better principle, which will not only eliminate the switch as part of the load-bearing circuit, I'm sure you've seen these burn up and fail before, but it will also increase the brightness of these outdated-ass headlights. And the best part is, it's entirely bolt-on, with no cutting, splicing, heat shrinking, or permanent modification to the factory wire harness. I'll also show you how to properly adjust and aim the headlights, so before I tore anything apart, I prepared the Jeep as outlined in Section 8L, page 6 of the factory service manual. But I'll get to that after we install this new harness, which was gifted to me by anonymous benefactor. Thank you very much, sir. For the headlight harness, all you need is sockets from 8 to 15 millimeter, a screwdriver, maybe some pliers, and a metal brush for cleaning off some threads, zip ties and optionally zip tie cutting utensils, and if you're going to adjust the headlights, a T15 Torx bit. You'd also need some masking tape and maybe a tape measure or two. Obviously, anytime you work with the electrical system, the battery has to be disconnected. With two 15mm nuts, I removed it, as we'll need the working room behind the headlight. Same with the other side, so get the airbox out of there too. On the 97 Plus headlight bezel, there's two Phillips screws in the top corners. The only real difference with this project on the older years is the way the header panel is put together. It's otherwise the same process. Next we have 4 screws lining the top of the grille. With those out, it just pivots forward. Now you got 4 screws that secure the headlight. These are very easy to strip out. They rust pretty bad as they're pretty directly exposed to the elements. When I replaced my headlights way back in the day, I coated each of these screws with anti-seize, and it's definitely paid off. With the retainer out, there's just a connector on the back of the headlight. Obviously repeat the process for both sides. With the bulbs out, we can put the H4 harness in. This is a bit of a weird camera angle, but we're looking towards the front. This is where the battery goes. There's a circular hole right here. I'm going to shove the driver's side of the harness through. Here's the top edge of that circular hole that I just put the wires through. It's got a route behind this, under the radiator over here. You can just see the very corner of the orange connector there. In order to get more room, I'm going to take the turn signal out. Alright, I got it pulled through here. Just goes under the radiator and behind this little corner of the headlight area. You want to be careful not to knock into this valve that would empty the radiator of all its coolant. Don't want to do that. I've just tucked that wire under the condenser for now. Just want to pull your orange connector through this hole in the back of the headlight area. Then you'll put your ground through the back side. You can put this anywhere you want. If you could find a nut that fits on this stud down here, I think that'd be a really clean place to put it, but otherwise you can just go for this one, which I don't have, so I'm probably just going to ground it to this bolt on the radiator support. You'll want these two ends at the passenger headlight and the rest of the harness looking something like this. I'll do the same thing with this ground, going for that radiator support bolt here too. As for mounting the relays on their included bracket, I think the best move is to use this front lower bolt on the cruise control module. Even if you don't have cruise control, this hole will still be there, so you can use any plain old self-tapping screw that fits. Should be just enough clearance with the battery. Speaking of, you'll have to attach this red wire to the positive terminal. With the JeepCables upgrade, this couldn't have been easier. I got a separate video covering that install. And with the H4 harness routed, I threw the battery back in to make sure everything fit. There's plenty enough slack in the positive wire, and it does clear the relays. Routing this positive wire, you want to be a little careful because the hood prop is going to clip in right here if you don't have these fancy hood struts. Got a separate video on those. So I'm just going to shove this provided 30 amp fuse down in here, and it should stay out of the way of like the hood spring and the prop and everything. And as you can see, there is enough clearance for those relays between the battery. We just barely got enough room. This is an oversized battery anyway, so the stock XJ battery will fit in here just fine. Then I put the passenger turn signal back in, and on this side you'll plug this black connector into the original headlight plug. This is how the H4 harness works its magic. It'll use the power input to toggle the relays, which is super clever and means we don't have to connect anything to the headlight switch inside. Then it can just be shoved back here. The orange connector attaches to the headlight itself, which can now be reinstalled. On the driver's side, we simply don't need the original connector at all, and it can be put together all the same. With the two headlights installed and connected, I just zip-tied the H4 harness to this existing wiring harness in the header panel here, threw the airbox back in. Now I'll reconnect the battery and we'll test everything out. When you've verified it all works, the grille can go back on. But before we put the headlight bezels in, it's a great opportunity to aim the headlights. May as well, you know? Now, there's a pretty nice universal way to do this that ChrisFix has an excellent video on, but I figured just for fun, let's see what kind of nonsensical obstacle course the factory service manual wants you to do. It specifically states that in order to properly aim the headlights, the cargo area has to be empty, the fuel tank should be full, and the tire pressures should all be accurate to the door sticker, 33 psi. You need a flat vertical surface perpendicular to flat ground. Drive the Jeep right up to it to get it as straight as you can, and then back up so the lens of the headlights is 25 feet away from that flat surface. Remember, keep it as straight as you can. Then, in the exact center of your headlight aiming screen, place a line of tape 5 feet above the ground. From the back of the vehicle, verify this line is centered, which mine is not, so I had to scoot it over. Then, rock the vehicle back and forth 3 times to settle the suspension. Bounce the front suspension to settle it even more. Now, measure from the ground to the exact center of a headlight and record that measurement. 33.5. Transfer that measurement to the aiming screen and put a line of tape there. Then measure the other headlight from the ground to its center. 34. And transfer that measurement the same way. Then, for some reason, put a line of tape at the exact center of the grille. Measure from that center line to the center of each headlight, and transfer those measurements to the aiming screen with tape also. Then, cover the headlight that is not being adjusted and turn them on. I decided to idle the engine so as not to kill the battery, although that particular detail is not mentioned in the service manual. You can see the high intensity pattern is pretty low. It needs to be no more than 1 inch above and 3 inches below the horizontal line. Above and to the side of each headlight are these adjusting screws, which can be Phillips screws on the older models. By twisting it, you'll move the headlight beam. And there you go, that's all this one needed.
3 inches below it and 1 inches above, and then 2 inches to either side.
The camera doesn't really display what the beams actually look like, but this is good enough, I say, so now let's do the other one. I was trying to get it even with the driver's side.
What? Apparently this is a thing that can happen. The adjustment screw just kind of like slipped off of its little notch in there, and well, now the headlight's all hot because it's been on for 10 minutes, so I gotta wait for that to cool down. So the little bucket that the headlight sits in is clearly deformed. I don't know how that happened. I guess I'm just gonna try to bend it back with some pliers. What a weird thing. It's probably one of those issues that literally nobody else has ever heard of. Alright, I got it back in there. We'll see if I tighten it down again and it doesn't just do the same thing. I got them adjusted fairly acceptably. I think that's going to be good enough. I might do a little fine tuning off camera, but once you've got them properly adjusted, you can go ahead and put the bezels back in.
I took a before and after picture with the camera focused at the same point with the same settings under the same conditions at night. And you can immediately see how much brighter the exact same headlights are just by changing the way they get their power. Pictures don't really do it justice, so here's a video clip from before I put the harness in, side by side with James's XJ, which did have it.
3XJ with the H4 upgrade and my 01XJ without it. We both have the same halogen headlights. This is literally the difference that the harness makes.
It is actually pretty incredible. And if you're still not convinced, I got an app that measures light level through the front camera and moved it around the brightest area of the headlights from 25 feet away, before and after, to get a lumen reading. Without the H4 harness, my driver's side peaked at 380 and the passenger side at a lousy 270 lumens. After the harness, the driver's side hit 943 lumens and the passenger side made it up to 705. That's literally over double the brightness from the same headlights, and of course, now there's no risk of melting the switch either. JeepCables makes good quality stuff in my experience, but you can find these harnesses for a lot cheaper at your own risk. You can even make one yourself, and now that I've seen the difference firsthand, this is definitely in my top 5 recommended modifications for an XJ. It will work with LEDs too. I just personally don't like LED headlights, and even without the harness, my halogen bulbs were good enough. I don't need to see through cows, thank you.